Millionaire husband regrets hugging mistress when he sees his poor wife being proposed to by a CEO. Caleb Whitmore believed he had it all. A sprawling estate perched above the Napa Valley vineyards, a booming enterprise with international influence, and a stunning wife whose gentle smile lit up every black tie affair they attended. But beneath the surface of tailored suits and extravagant galas, something was amiss, something Caleb chose to ignore. Blinded by success and the illusion of limitless affection, he believed himself invincible. Little did he know, a single moment, a fleeting hug with the wrong woman, would threaten to unravel everything. What happens when the once devoted wife, humiliated and heartbroken, is proposed to by a man even more powerful than Caleb himself? Caleb Whitmore was the kind of man who drew attention effortlessly. Tall, with piercing steel-gray eyes and a commanding stride, he carried an air of triumph wherever he went. The Whitmore legacy was rumored to have begun generations ago when his grandfather struck it rich in South African diamond mines. By the time his father, Gerald Whitmore, inherited the fortune, it had expanded into luxury resorts, tech holdings, and charitable ventures. Caleb followed in their footsteps, scaling the family empire even further with a knack for spotting rising markets. A quick flip through the glossy pages of Global Enterprise Monthly would often reveal his confident grin, usually beside his refined and elegant wife, Liana. They were the picture of a modern power couple. Liana Whitmore wasn't born into wealth. She grew up in a close-knit community outside of Santa Rosa, California, where hard work was a way of life. She funded her college education through scholarships and part-time jobs. Meeting Caleb had felt like a dream slipping into reality. It wasn't just the sparkle of high society that drew her in. It was Caleb's relentless drive. Together, they seemed untouchable. Their grand residence in Sonoma County featured polished marble floors, gold-leaf chandeliers imported from France, and panoramic views of the vineyards below. It was a home designed for elegant soirees, fundraising galas, and strategic business meetings. Every inch of it whispered old money and ambition and tradition. The carved mahogany banister in the grand foyer, the antique paintings carefully selected from Berlin estate auctions, and the perfectly manicured gardens stretching across acres showcasing rare camellias and shimmering koi ponds. But the wealth and fine decor only told one side of the story. When the guests departed and silence settled over the estate, an emotional distance between husband and wife was palpable. Their master bedroom, spacious enough to fit a small family's entire home, felt cold. The bed, draped in Egyptian cotton, was often half empty by dawn. Caleb's demanding schedule had him jetting from San Francisco to Zurich to Dubai, sometimes with only an hour's notice. Meanwhile, Liana found herself stirring her morning chamomile tea alone, seated at a table meant for two. It wasn't that Caleb didn't love Liana, at least not in the beginning. He truly had. But as his global ventures grew, they gradually eclipsed the tender moments that had once defined their relationship. Text messages replaced warm conversations. Business calls dragged deep into the night, drowning out the quiet whispers that had once connected them. Liana began to feel a growing sense of isolation. She kept herself busy with charity work. She volunteered regularly with the Clinton Health Access Initiative and spearheaded statewide fundraisers for children's hospitals. Still, the emptiness lingered. To the outside world, the Whitmores appeared to be the perfect couple. Cameras often caught them smiling at black-tie galas, holding hands at groundbreaking ceremonies. Society columns gushed about their philanthropic impact and praised Liana's timeless sense of fashion, her silk gowns, her graceful demeanor, her flawless taste in diamonds. Even close friends like Isabel Chang and David Lancaster, who had known them since their early years, were convinced the Whitmores would endure forever. And why wouldn't they? Every anniversary, Caleb gifted Liana a luxury car. He surprised her with spontaneous weekend escapes to places like Santorini or Kyoto, layering memory upon memory as though each extravagant moment could patch the growing gap between them. Liana smiled through it all, ever the gracious hostess, always the perfect wife. But beneath the calm surface, something quietly ached. Every time Caleb left the house with a distracted kiss on the cheek, she'd find herself wondering, is this what happiness really looks like? And each time the thought crossed her mind, she pushed it away. After all, they had everything most people dreamed of. power, status, admiration. Surely that was enough to sustain a beautiful life. But the cracks were forming. Hairline fractures in the polished marble of their marriage. The closeness they once shared had faded, replaced by polite pleasantries and carefully maintained illusions. Outwardly, they still appeared to be a strong, united couple. But behind closed doors, laughter had grown faint, and affection hovered on the edge of extinction. Not even Liana allowed herself to imagine that these fractures might widen, until the moment came. A moment so seemingly innocent, yet so devastating. A forbidden hug. Little did they know, the world they had built so carefully was about to be tested in a way that would change everything. Liana awoke the next morning to find the space beside her empty. Caleb had left at dawn for a business meeting in downtown San Francisco. The city was abuzz with headlines. Renowned tech magnate Darius Tanaka was expanding his investment empire on the West Coast. Caleb, always on the lookout for powerful alliances, had jumped at the chance to arrange a breakfast meeting. With a soft sigh, Liana wandered into her walk-in closet. Racks of designer dresses, neatly arranged shoes, and an array of handbags greeted her, silent reminders of Caleb's generosity. She selected a modest yet elegant knee-length dress in pastel mint, a color that reminded her of blooming vineyards in early spring. It felt fitting for the day's plan, volunteering at a local children's hospital fundraiser. Downstairs, their longtime housekeeper, Rosa, greeted her with a warm smile and a steaming pot of jasmine tea. "Good morning, Mrs. Whitmore," she said gently. "Will you and Mr. Whitmore be dining at home tonight?" Liana returned a polite smile. "I'm not sure, Rosa. Caleb has back-to-back meetings, but let's prepare something light in case he makes it back." Rosa nodded, concern flickering in her expression. She had served the Whitmores for over a decade and had silently witnessed the growing distance between them. Many nights, she had heard Liana's footsteps pacing the quiet hallways, and she had noticed how rarely Caleb's side of the bed looked touched. But Rosa, ever discreet, kept these observations to herself. Later that morning, Liana arrived at the hospital. The lobby was lively. Bright balloons floated overhead, and enthusiastic volunteers buzzed around setting up silent auction tables and distributing flyers about pediatric research. This was Liana's world. She thrived in it. She adored the sense of purpose, the heartfelt smiles, and the knowledge that her time and effort truly made a difference. She moved easily among the doctors, nurses, and fellow volunteers, her poise and grace adding a layer of prestige to the event. As the event unfolded, she slipped her phone from her handbag and checked for messages from Caleb. Nothing. Not even a simple, "Good luck today." It wasn't unusual, but every time it happened, it chipped away at her spirit. "He's probably just busy," she murmured to herself, sliding the phone back into her bag. Still, a quiet sadness lingered beneath the surface. After several hours of fundraising, Liana walked to a nearby cafe with her longtime friend from university, Sienna Blake. Sienna was known for her quick wit and unwavering loyalty, the kind of friend who would show up at your doorstep at 3 a.m. with coffee and a blanket if she knew you were hurting. Over warm bowls of tomato bisque, Sienna gave Liana a long, steady look. "So, how are things at home, Lee?" Liana stiffened slightly. "Fine," she replied with forced calm. "Busy, as always. You know Caleb, he's constantly chasing some new deal." Sienna's gaze didn't budge. "Look, I've known you two since the start. You used to talk about everything. Silly jokes, wild dreams, even your weird fears about houseplants. Now, every time I see you, you're alone. If something's wrong, you can tell me." Liana gave a faint smile. "It's just life, Sienna. We're both busy. Caleb's empire is expanding, and I've got my nonprofit work. It's a different phase, that's all." "A different phase," Sienna echoed, eyebrows raised. "Or are you just drifting apart?" Liana reached across the table and gently squeezed her friend's hand. "I appreciate your honesty. I really do. But I'm okay, I promise." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "If it ever gets too heavy to carry, you'll be the first to know." They parted with a warm embrace. Sienna's blunt honesty had always grounded Liana. Still, as she walked alone back to her car, she couldn't shake the sinking feeling, like she was stranded on a quiet, lonely island of her own making. That night, Caleb didn't return until nearly midnight. Liana sat waiting in the living room, a fashion magazine open across her lap. The grand chandelier above cast soft golden light throughout the space. When Caleb finally walked through the door, he looked more drained than usual. Dark circles shadowed his eyes and his suit jacket hung loose over his arm. "You're still awake," he murmured, voice low. "I'm sorry I'm late. The meeting with Darius Tanaka ran over. Then I had to sit down with a few European investors." Liana offered a tentative smile. "I understand. I saved dinner for you, but we can warm it up if you're hungry." Caleb dropped onto the couch with a weary sigh. "Thanks, but I grabbed something on the way back. I appreciate the gesture, though." His eyes landed on her, noting the soft robe she wore, her hair gathered into a relaxed bun. Something about her calm posture and the chandelier's glow tugged at a memory. The early days when he would have rushed home just to sit beside her. But just as quickly the thought faded. He looked away, thumbing through the notifications on his phone. Home just to share a simple meal. But just as quickly the moment faded. Caleb looked away, scrolling through his phone. "I'll head up soon," he mumbled. "Just need to wrap up a few notes." Liana nodded gently. "All right, good night," she said softly before turning and heading upstairs. That same dull ache returned, one she couldn't quite define. Something in his voice and the way he avoided her gaze tugged at her heart. She longed to pull him into a tight embrace, to remind him that they weren't just cohabitants in a grand estate. They were once lovers, partners. But the space between them now felt too vast to close in a single step. Caleb watched her retreat, a flicker of guilt stirring in his chest. He told himself it was all for their future, for the Whitmore legacy. But as his thumbs skimmed through unread messages, one persistent thought refused to be silenced. What if, in chasing success, I lose the only person who truly matters? A month later, Caleb found himself at a prestigious gala in downtown San Francisco, held at the Grand Monarch Regency Hotel. The event was a fundraiser supporting global childhood education initiatives. Caleb had been invited as a keynote speaker to deliver remarks on modern philanthropy and corporate responsibility. Liana had originally planned to accompany him, but an unexpected illness in her family had pulled her back to Santa Rosa that very morning. Though she hated to miss such events, her sister's plea for support couldn't be ignored. Navigating the swirl of dignitaries, Fortune 500 executives, and recognizable names from the philanthropy world, Caleb exchanged greetings with people like Elon Musk and Melinda French Gates. The ballroom sparkled with gold accents and glimmering chandeliers, an ideal setting for the elite to mingle and make promises over champagne. Between speeches, Caleb stepped away to the mezzanine, needing a moment to review his notes and collect his thoughts. That's when he saw her, Sabrina Morales. Seated alone at a tastefully decorated table, she swirled her champagne flute with effortless elegance. Sabrina had a striking presence, waist-length ebony hair, piercing hazel eyes, and a posture that radiated quiet confidence. She was deep in conversation with a man Caleb recognized, a well-known publisher of an influential global journal. Moments later, as the publisher excused himself, Sabrina's eyes scanned the room and landed on Caleb. Her lips curled into a poised, almost mischievous smile. She lifted her glass slightly and gave a nod, beckoning him over. Never one to shy away from introductions, Caleb approached. "Caleb Whitmore," he said, offering a handshake. "I don't believe we've met." She shook his hand with practiced grace. "Sabrina Morales, a pleasure. I've heard your speech as one of the highlights of the evening." Caleb let out a modest laugh. "Well, I hope I don't disappoint. And you? Are you here representing one of the organizations?" Sabrina leaned in slightly, the faint scent of jasmine perfume trailing behind her. "I'm on the board of a global initiative called Lumina Reach. We provide scholarships for girls in underserved regions. This gala is vital to our annual fundraising." She gave a knowing smile. "But let's be honest, events like this are just as much about networking as they are about doing good." Caleb nodded, intrigued. "Sometimes, yes. Though I like to believe we still accomplish meaningful things, despite the glamour and champagne." Sabrina offered an elegant shrug. "Absolutely, but practicality matters too." She tilted her head, studying him. "I'm familiar with the Whitmore legacy. Your family has a strong philanthropic reputation." Caleb felt a ripple of pride rise in his chest. "We try to do what we can. My wife, Liana, is actually the heart of our hospital fundraisers. She's away tonight, family emergency back in Santa Rosa. But typically, she'd be right here beside me at an event like this. Sabrina's expression softened. I hope everything's okay with your family. It's wonderful that your wife shares your passion for philanthropy. Not every partner does. There was nothing overtly flirtatious in her tone, but something in her voice, its depth, her unwavering eye contact, carried an intensity that pulled him in. They spent the next half hour exchanging stories. Sabrina recounted her time in refugee camps across conflict zones in Eastern Africa, while Caleb spoke about Liana's pediatric health initiatives and his father's commitment to reshaping access to education. Before long, an announcement summoned Caleb to the stage. He stepped up confidently and delivered his keynote, interweaving personal anecdotes with the broader call for sustainable giving. The room erupted into applause when he concluded. Though he noticed appreciative looks from several women throughout the ballroom, it was Sabrina's quiet, lingering attention that stayed with him. She approached him later near the buffet. "You speak with passion about change," she said, lifting a fresh glass of champagne. "It's refreshing, in a room that's often more about vanity projects than actual impact." Caleb smiled. "I've always believed real philanthropy has to come from personal conviction. I'd love to hear more about your work sometime." He glanced at his watch. "If you're not in a rush, I'd be happy to walk you out." Sabrina raised an eyebrow, then gave a subtle nod. "I'd like that." They strolled together through the marble corridors of the Monarch Regency. The soft echo of their footsteps intertwined with distant conversations and bursts of laughter. Outside, the night air was cool and clean, the city skyline glowing in hues of neon and gold. A sleek black limousine waited for Caleb, while a reserved town car stood nearby for Sabrina. The silence between them wasn't awkward, it was charged. A few steps passed without a word, yet every breath felt like a decision unspoken. When they reached the curb, the glow of the city seemed to dim behind the tension gently simmering between them. Before parting, she slipped him a business card. "Sabrina Morales, Global Outreach Director, Lumina Reach Foundation. Contact me anytime," she said softly, the glow of the city casting a warm shimmer across her confident smile. Her fingers brushed his as he took the card, a light, fleeting touch, but enough to send a quiet jolt through his chest. "I have a feeling we could build something meaningful together." Caleb slid the card into his inner jacket pocket, feeling a subtle thrill, one that felt like more than business. He tried to dismiss it. He was, after all, a married man. Still, on the ride home, he replayed their exchange in his mind. Her confidence, her passion, her calm, magnetic energy. He shifted uncomfortably in his seat, aware of how vividly she lingered in his thoughts. It wasn't just her words, it was the way she looked at him. Like she already knew something he wasn't ready to admit. It lingered longer than he wanted to admit. 2 days later, an email from Sabrina arrived in his inbox. She proposed a lunch meeting to explore collaborative projects between their foundations. Caleb agreed. There was no harm in meeting for a professional conversation, especially when it could benefit children in need. Still, as he hovered over the keyboard, rereading her message, there was a pause, an internal tug he didn't want to name. But as he typed his reply, setting a time and place at a stylish new restaurant in Soma, he couldn't ignore the flutter of anticipation rising in his chest. Was it the excitement of a promising new venture, or something else entirely? That question hung in the back of his mind all day. By the time he arrived home that night, Liana was already asleep. She'd just returned from Santa Rosa, exhausted from tending to her sister's health emergency. Caleb stood silently at the edge of their bed and looked at her peaceful expression. He leaned down and kissed her forehead gently. She didn't stir. He told himself he hadn't done anything wrong. He was pursuing philanthropy, expanding possibilities. But the image of Sabrina's half-smile, the way her voice dipped slightly when she said meaningful, crept in like a shadow. Somewhere deeper, quieter, he knew that a line had been drawn, and once crossed, it would be impossible to return. 3 weeks later, Caleb sat at an upscale eatery tucked into a quiet corner of San Francisco's tech district. The leather-bound menu rested in his lap. He adjusted his cufflinks and glanced at his phone, half expecting a midday check-in from Liana. She usually texted around this time, but lately her messages had become brief and infrequent, mostly about household tasks, calendar events, or donation updates. Sabrina arrived exactly on time. The sharp click of her heels echoed across the polished wood floor as she approached. Heads turned to follow her. She wore a tailored navy dress with subtle gold accents, exuding an air of understated luxury. Caleb stood to greet her, offering a courteous handshake, one that somehow felt more intimate than it should have. "Punctuality," Sabrina remarked with a soft smile. "Always a good sign." They settled into their seats, and Sabrina wasted no time diving into conversation. She began outlining Lumina Reach's newest outreach initiatives: education grants for girls in Southeast Asia, healthcare efforts in rural parts of Kenya, and emergency relief funds for flood-stricken communities in Central America. Caleb listened closely, noting how well she understood each project, right down to the financial details and the logistical hurdles of working in remote locations. As the waiter arrived to take their orders, Sabrina leaned in slightly. "I've seen your family's name connected to several major philanthropic efforts," she said. "But I'm curious, Caleb, do you have a personal cause that means something to you?" He paused, momentarily caught off guard. His mind drifted to Liana's passion for pediatric care and how deeply she involved herself in local hospital projects. "My wife is especially devoted to improving children's health care," he said, gently stirring the ice in his water glass. "I've leaned more toward funding innovative medical research. It's a broad focus, admittedly, but I've always believed in driving breakthroughs." Sabrina nodded, her eyes bright with interest. "Innovation is important, but so is connection. Sometimes when a mission becomes too big, it loses its soul." Her words echoed sentiments Caleb had voiced himself during his keynote at the gala. He was quietly impressed by how closely she'd paid attention. Their conversation moved easily between ideals and logistics, between personal philosophies and strategic execution. Caleb found himself unusually relaxed in her company, engaged in a way he hadn't experienced with a new acquaintance in quite some time. Before the main course arrived, Sabrina pulled a neatly organized folder from her bag and slid it across the table. "Here are a few potential collaborations," she said. "Your foundation could partner with ours on existing programs, or we could create something new, a joint venture, the kind that could make a serious impact if we combine resources." Caleb flipped through the pages. "This is impressive," he murmured. "Very thorough planning. I'll need to run it by my board, of course, but there's definitely potential for synergy." Sabrina smiled, clearly pleased. "I had a feeling you'd be open. Your track record suggested as much." There it was again, that quiet, grounded confidence. It both intrigued and unsettled him. He reminded himself that this was strictly business, and yet he couldn't ignore the spark he felt in her presence. A fleeting thought crossed his mind. What if I spent more time with someone like her? Driven, passionate, electric. Then guilt pressed down on him. "You're married, Caleb. Remember your vows, your history, your wife." He clenched his jaw lightly, trying to suppress the heat rising in his chest. It wasn't just attraction, it was temptation dressed in elegance, layered with admiration and curiosity. Dangerous in its subtlety. Determined to stay professional, he refocused on the contents of the folder in front of him. After their meal, they lingered over coffee. The conversation drifted from philanthropy to light-hearted anecdotes, shared observations about life among the elite, humorous run-ins at galas, and memorable travel stories. The more they talked, the more the edges between personal and professional blurred. Just slightly, but enough to be felt. Sabrina recounted a harrowing moment during a hurricane relief mission in the Philippines. Caleb responded with stories of his father's firm belief in quiet giving and long-term impact. Their laughter came easy now. Too easy. Like two people who had known each other longer than they should. They both laughed when they realized they'd attended the same leadership conference in London years ago, though their paths hadn't crossed back then. Eventually, Caleb checked his watch. "I hate to cut this short, but I've got a meeting across town in half an hour." Sabrina placed her cup gently on the table. "Of course. Thank you for your time. I'm looking forward to your thoughts on the proposal." They stood and stepped outside. The sun blazed over downtown San Francisco, and the usual city chaos surrounded them. Taxis honking, cyclists weaving through traffic, pedestrians chatting into earbuds as they rushed past. Yet, For a moment, the noise faded. Not in volume, but in relevance. Everything else seemed to dull around the quiet intensity that hung in the space between them. For a brief moment, they stood at the curb, seemingly still in the current of motion all around them. "I'm really glad we had the chance to talk in depth," Sabrina said, extending her hand. "Let's not let it be the last." Caleb nodded, slipping her folder under his arm. "We'll be in touch soon. Thanks for meeting on such short notice." Her eyes flickered with something. Warmth, perhaps. Anytime. She turned slowly, her stride poised, but there was a lingering glance over her shoulder, as if testing whether he'd watch her walk away. He did. He hailed a cab and climbed into the back seat, giving the driver an address in Pacific Heights. As the car pulled away, he glanced back and caught one final image of Sabrina standing on the sidewalk, confident and composed against the city's backdrop. A wave of unease crept over him. He felt as if he was standing at the edge of something dangerous, a threshold. And though every part of him told him to back away, he couldn't quite make himself do it. "It's just business," he told himself. But a whisper deep within disagreed. 3 blocks later, his phone buzzed. A message from Liana. "Hey, how's your day going? Thinking of you." He stared at the screen, a mix of warmth and guilt washing over him in equal measure. Her message felt like a lifeline and a mirror. He typed back a quick reply, short, almost formal. Then he powered off the phone. He needed time. Time to breathe, to think. Was this just excitement over a promising partnership, or was it something far more dangerous? Dangerous, unfolding under the polished banner of philanthropy. Caleb didn't fully realize what was taking shape, and that uncertainty was both exhilarating and terrifying. In the weeks that followed, he immersed himself in the potential collaboration with Sabrina's foundation. Emails flew back and forth at all hours, filled with carefully structured proposals, grant outlines, and budget forecasts. Conference calls that began with formal updates often ended with a few minutes of easy banter and unexpected laughter. He told himself the late-night calls were necessary. Time zones, he reasoned. Global coordination requires flexibility. But Liana noticed the difference. The sly glances at his phone during dinner, the sudden silence when she entered his study, the way he pulled his laptop screen slightly closer when she passed behind him. She tried not to overthink it. Caleb had always been ambitious, obsessive, even. It wasn't unusual for him to throw himself into large-scale projects, but this time felt different. As if a new wall, silent and invisible, had quietly risen between them. One evening, Liana decided to bridge the distance the only way she knew how, by recreating comfort. She spent the afternoon preparing his favorite dinner, braised short ribs with roasted root vegetables, and topped it off with a rich chocolate mousse. She remembered how Caleb used to light up like a kid when she served it. She set the dining table with fine china, placed fresh flowers in the center, and lit soft, citrus-scented candles. The room glowed with warmth and quiet intention. Caleb arrived home later than expected. She heard the keys jingle in the foyer and moved quickly to greet him. His tie was loose, his shoulders tired. When he saw the table, so beautifully arranged, he paused in surprise. "Wow," he said, setting his briefcase down. "What's all this?" Liana forced a hopeful smile. "I thought maybe we could have a quiet dinner. Just us. It's been a while." His expression softened briefly. He leaned in and kissed her cheek. "That's really thoughtful. I'm sorry I'm so late. I had to finish finalizing some elements with Lumina Reach. There's a hard deadline for our pilot launch in Southeast Asia." She guided him to the table, noting the subtle tension that still clung to him. The way his fingers twitched, the quick flick of his eyes toward his phone. "You must be exhausted," she said gently. "Let's eat." They sat. For a while, the conversation felt almost natural. Caleb complimented the meal. Liana told him about her latest hospital fundraiser. They spoke about upcoming charity events, the updated lighting in the guest wing of their estate, the spring benefit ball. But the deeper they went into the evening, more and more, Liana sensed his distraction. At one point, his phone buzzed. She watched as Caleb glanced at the screen, his lips curving into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "Another business matter?" she asked, trying to sound casual. He slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Yes, sorry. Urgent details about tomorrow's strategy call." A knot of unease tightened in Liana's stomach. She tried to concentrate on the food in front of her, but the tension was undeniable. Finally, she gathered the courage to ask the question lingering in her heart. "Are we okay?" Caleb hesitated. "Of course. Why do you ask?" It feels like we haven't been connecting lately. You've been so distracted, I can't help but notice." He sighed and set down his fork. "I'm juggling a lot right now. We're on the edge of something huge. If this collaboration works out, it could redefine what the Whitmore Foundation does on a global scale." Liana wanted to ask, with whom? Why the secrecy? But she bit her tongue, not wanting to sound accusatory. Instead, she reached across the table and gently touched his hand. "I get it, but I miss you, Caleb. Really miss you. Sometimes it feels like I'm living with a ghost." He squeezed her hand. His eyes flickered with guilt. "I'm sorry, Lee. I'll try to make more time. Let's plan a weekend away. Just the two of us." She nodded, forcing a small smile. But deep down, something told her a weekend trip wouldn't fix what had quietly fractured between them. Caleb returned to his meal, and though their conversation shifted to lighter topics, charity events, household updates, new landscaping ideas, the uncertainty lingered like a low hum beneath their words. Later, as they got ready for bed, Caleb's phone buzzed again. He excused himself to take it in the hallway. Liana watched his retreating silhouette, her heart sinking. She climbed into bed and pulled the covers up to her chin, feeling more alone than she had in months. When Caleb returned, he claimed it was about tomorrow's board meeting. Liana leaned in and kissed him goodnight, but even that felt distant, like kissing a memory instead of a man. He held her for a moment, but his mind was already somewhere else. That night, she barely slept. Her thoughts swirled, haunted by the growing fear that her marriage was slowly slipping through her fingers. In the quiet darkness, she recalled something her mother had once told her. "Don't let silence take root in your marriage. Speak up, even if the truth hurts." But Liana hesitated. What if the truth involved another woman? She wasn't ready for that. And so she let the silence grow, like a fine crack in glass, spreading wider with every quiet night. The following weekend, Liana drove north to visit her parents. She arrived in the quiet suburb just outside Santa Rosa, stepping into the comforting familiarity of her childhood home. Her mother, Ellen, greeted her with a tight, familiar hug, the kind that made Liana feel safe and loved in a way she hadn't felt in a long time. "How are you, sweetheart?" Ellen asked, guiding her into the cozy living room where the scent of freshly baked cookies lingered in the air. "I'm managing," Liana replied, sinking into an overstuffed armchair. She glanced around at the photographs lining the mantel, snapshots of her younger self laughing on a swing, her late father standing proudly behind her, frozen in time. A wave of bittersweet nostalgia washed over her. Life had been simpler then. Ellen handed her a plate of cookies and a warm cup of chamomile tea. "Tell me what's going on. I can feel it. Something's weighing on you." Liana stared into the steam curling from her mug. For a moment, she considered brushing off the question with a vague excuse about stress or work, but the tightness in her chest wouldn't let her. The weight had grown too heavy to carry alone. "Mom, I think Caleb and I are drifting apart," she said, her voice trembling. She told her mother everything, about the late nights, the quiet tension, the phone calls he always took in private, the growing emotional distance. Her words spilled out in uneven fragments, like she was unraveling right there in the living room. Her fingers trembled as she spoke. Ellen didn't interrupt, only watched with that deep, maternal knowing, the kind that saw pain before it was named. When Liana finished, a heavy silence settled between them. "Liana," Ellen said softly, "marriage is hard. People grow. Sometimes you have to fight to stay close. But is there something else? Do you think he might be seeing someone?" Liana's breath caught in her throat. She broke off a piece of cookie, fingers fidgeting with the crumbs. "I don't have proof," she admitted. "But there's this feeling I can't shake. He's always on his phone, and when I walk into the room he shuts down like he's hiding something." Her voice cracked, just barely. "I feel like I'm living with a stranger who still kisses me goodbye." Ellen reached over and took her daughter's hand. "You need to talk to him. Really talk. Let him know that you won't accept lies or half-truths. You deserve honesty, Liana, and respect." She squeezed her hand firmly. "This isn't just about love, it's about dignity. And you cannot lose yours trying to save someone else's comfort." Liana blinked quickly, trying to hold back tears. I'm scared, Mom. I'm scared of what I'll find out, and I'm scared of losing him. That's understandable, Ellen said, her voice calm but firm. But living in doubt, living in fear, is sometimes worse than facing the truth. You have a life to live, honey. Don't let fear hold you back. Her mother's words struck deep. Liana realized she had been waiting, hoping things would somehow fix themselves. Maybe it was time to stop waiting. Maybe it was time to confront Caleb, to fight for the love they once shared, even if it meant shattering the fragile illusion of their marriage in the process. The next day she returned to Sonoma with a renewed sense of purpose. As fate would have it, Caleb was away on another business trip, this time in Chicago for an investor summit. Determined not to let her momentum fade, Liana threw herself into her personal projects. She dedicated long hours to her children's hospital fundraiser, meeting with potential donors and finalizing the details for an upcoming charity banquet. She even joined a local yoga class to regain some mental and emotional balance. One afternoon, her phone rang. It was Sienna. I'm in town for a few days, her friend said. Drinks tonight? Liana hesitated. She'd grown so accustomed to the quiet walls of her estate that a night out felt almost unfamiliar. But then she remembered her mother's advice, the importance of reconnecting with people who truly cared. Sure, she said, smiling faintly. Why not? That evening, they met at a stylish lounge in downtown San Francisco. The bar shimmered with golden accents, and the low hum of conversation filled the space. Sienna greeted her with a warm hug. You look tired, she said, concern creasing her brow. Liana shrugged. I've been dealing with a lot. They ordered cocktails and found a quiet corner booth tucked beneath the soft glow of hanging lights. As the night unfolded, Liana poured out everything, her fears, her doubts, her talk with her mother. Sienna listened carefully, her face thoughtful. She asked the occasional question but never interrupted. Has he ever mentioned someone specific? She asked at one point. Anyone he seems unusually close with? Liana chewed on her lip. He's been working closely with a woman named Sabrina Morales. She runs a non-profit that his foundation's collaborating with. I've never met her, but he talks about the partnership a lot. Sienna's expression darkened slightly. Have you looked her up? Checked into who she is, what she does? Sometimes a simple search can tell you more than you'd expect. Liana felt a flicker of guilt. The idea of looking into one of Caleb's associates felt invasive, like prying. But Sienna's reasoning was sound. Knowledge was power. Maybe, Liana said slowly, but I feel like Caleb should be the one to tell me what's going on. Sienna reached across the table and placed a hand gently over hers. You deserve the truth. If he won't offer it freely, sometimes you have to go find it yourself. A swirl of emotions churned in Liana's chest. Fear, anger, confusion. She sipped the last of her cocktail and exhaled deeply. I'll figure it out, she said quietly. I'll figure it out, she said, her voice a mix of quiet fear and rising resolve. One way or another. Sienna squeezed her hand. Whatever happens, I'm here for you. Always. They parted that night with an embrace that lingered, full of silent support and unspoken understanding. On the drive home, Liana felt something flicker inside her, empowerment. There was a new voice in her mind, one that demanded clarity. If Caleb was still loyal, she would stand by him and fight for their bond. But if he had crossed a line, she shook off the thought before it could fully form. Yet somewhere beneath the sadness, a small ember of anger smoldered. She was Liana Whitmore, a thoughtful, compassionate woman who had poured everything into her marriage. If Caleb had betrayed her, she wouldn't fall apart in silence. She would stand tall and face the truth, no matter how painful it was. Later that week, Liana attended a high-profile charity auction at the San Francisco Museum of Art. As she stepped into the grand marble foyer alone, a ripple of anxiety passed through her. But she steadied herself. She was no stranger to events like this. There was a time when she and Caleb had walked into rooms like this together, arm in arm, sharing whispered jokes between handshakes with dignitaries and philanthropists. But tonight, she would navigate it on her own. The auction featured rare artifacts from across the globe, with all proceeds supporting international education programs, an initiative that aligned perfectly with her own philanthropic mission. Dressed in a sleek black gown that moved like water, Liana glided through the crowd, offering polite smiles and familiar nods. She exchanged brief pleasantries with acquaintances, scanning the room, half expecting Caleb to appear. He was usually present at events like this, but tonight he was nowhere to be seen. Midway through the evening, as she admired a vivid oil painting near the back of the exhibit, a smooth voice behind her spoke. "Stunning, isn't it?" She turned. A tall, poised man in an impeccably tailored navy suit stood behind her. His features were striking, sharp cheekbones, intelligent eyes, and a composed confidence that suggested he was more than just a wealthy attendee. "Lucas Chen," he said, extending a hand. Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Lucas Chen? I've heard of you, your tech investments, your global ventures." She took his hand, struck by the warmth and assurance in his grip. "I'm Liana Whitmore." Recognition sparked in his gaze. "Whitmore, as in Caleb Whitmore's wife?" She inclined her head. "That's right." Lucas smiled, and it reached his eyes. A genuine smile, not the polished version she was so used to in rooms like this. "I've crossed paths with your husband in a few business circles," he said. "Sharp mind. Excellent strategist. But I believe this is our first official meeting." Liana returned his smile with a gracious nod. "It's a pleasure. What brings you here tonight?" He gestured toward the artwork before them, a breathtaking Renaissance piece. "I'm fascinated by art that tells stories of human resilience," he said. "This one, it speaks volumes about perseverance in the face of adversity." Then, shifting his focus to Liana, he added with quiet sincerity, "And of course, I'm here to support the education initiatives. I believe in giving back, especially in a world that's so relentlessly driven by technology. Education is the only thing that truly levels the playing field." There was no performance in his tone, just depth. Something grounded, deliberate. For a moment, Liana felt the weight on her shoulders ease, as if someone else understood how exhausting it was to always be strong. Something in Lucas's voice, his earnestness, the calm intensity behind his words, put Liana at ease. They began talking, first about early childhood education, and then about the intricate challenges of global philanthropy, the moral responsibilities of leadership, and the evolving role of technology in humanitarian work. Unlike many of the men she'd encountered in elite circles, Lucas seemed deeply engaged. He asked real questions. He listened, really listened, and brought new, refreshing perspectives to the causes she held close to her heart. His presence felt like a pause from the chaos. He didn't dominate the conversation or try to impress. He simply met her where she was. And somehow it was exactly what she needed. They eventually wandered to a more private seating area near the sculpture gallery. Champagne glasses in hand, their conversation deepened. They explored ideas about how digital innovation could revolutionize access to healthcare, and how philanthropy itself might evolve in a changing world. Liana felt something stir, something she hadn't felt in a long time, a flicker of excitement. She hadn't realized just how much she missed this kind of connection, intellectual, emotional, real, not forced, not curated for appearances, just honest. At one point, Lucas noticed the subtle hesitation in her tone. "I hope you don't mind me asking, but is Caleb here tonight?" Liana's posture tensed slightly. "He was invited," she said, her voice measured. "But he had business commitments." The practiced calm in her answer cracked ever so slightly. Lucas nodded, reading between the lines with graceful ease. "Such is the life of busy executives," he said. "I respect Caleb's work. He's been leading some impressive initiatives lately." The moment he said it, her stomach twisted. He hadn't said the name, but she had. In her mind, Sabrina Morales. Her heart clenched at the mention of Sabrina Morales. The name alone stirred a wave of unease. "Yes," she replied quietly. "I've heard a bit about those. I'm still catching up on the details." Lucas offered a soft smile. Sometimes, in the rush to build something new, people forget the ones who stood by them from the beginning. He paused, his voice kind, almost too gentle. "I hope that's not happening to you." The words landed like a whisper and a warning all at once. Liana blinked, nearly undone by the empathy in his tone. She forced a polite smile and sipped her champagne, her thoughts whirling. For the first time in what felt like ages, she felt seen, truly seen. It was disarming, and strangely comforting. They continued their conversation until the auction formally began. When the bidding started, Liana found herself seated beside Lucas. He won a rare scroll painting from East Asia, offering a generous donation that earned a wave of appreciative applause from the audience. Throughout the event, he glanced her way now and then, a subtle check-in that felt more personal than he might have intended. At the end of the night, as guests slowly made their way toward the exit, Lucas offered to walk her to her car. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the dark sky. A crisp breeze swept through the trees lining the edge of Golden Gate Park across the street. They paused near the curb, both seemingly reluctant to say goodbye. "It was a pleasure talking with you tonight," Lucas said softly. "You have a genuine heart for philanthropic work. That's rare these days, when so many people give for recognition instead of purpose." "Likewise," Liana replied, wrapping her shawl around her shoulders. "You seem truly passionate about making an impact." He hesitated, as if weighing whether to say more. Then, in a low, sincere tone, he added, "I hope this isn't the last time we talk. If you ever want to discuss ideas, or just need someone to listen, I'd be glad to connect." He handed her a business card, elegant, embossed with his name and the logo of his multinational firm. Liana accepted it, her heart fluttering in a way that surprised her. "Thank you, I appreciate that." As her car pulled up, a pang of regret tugged at her. She didn't want the conversation to end. She turned to him with a final smile. "Have a good night." "You too, Liana," Lucas replied, stepping aside to let her into the vehicle. On the ride home, she held the card lightly in her fingers, replaying every detail of their conversation. She hadn't gone to the event expecting to connect with anyone, let alone a globally renowned CEO known for his integrity and vision. Yet she couldn't deny that Lucas Chen had left a deep impression. For the first time in what felt like forever, she felt a flicker of hope. Not necessarily romantic, but something else. A reminder that she was still capable of connection, of being truly seen. What she didn't yet know was how profoundly this chance meeting would ripple through her life and shake the already fragile foundation of her marriage, especially once Caleb discovered the bond quietly forming between his wife and the enigmatic Lucas Chen. Meanwhile, Sabrina Morales' intentions were never purely philanthropic. Born into a modest family on the outskirts of Buenos Aires, she had learned early that beauty, brains, and ambition could catapult her beyond any limitations. She hadn't built the Lumina Reach Foundation out of pure altruism. It was also strategic. Sabrina understood that charity unlocked access, and access was often more valuable than cash. Over time, she had embedded herself in elite circles, social, corporate, and philanthropic, carefully cultivating alliances that expanded her influence. When she first met Caleb Whitmore at the gala, she saw more than his reputation and wealth. She sensed his vulnerability. Yes, he was polished, respected, successful, but beneath all that, there were cracks of loneliness. As their professional collaboration deepened, Sabrina began testing the boundaries, sending Caleb carefully worded messages late at night, often cloaked as urgent queries needing his input. She complimented his dedication, praised his vision in ways that stroked his ego. Slowly, deliberately, she chipped away at his defenses. In her sleek penthouse overlooking the San Francisco Bay, Sabrina relished the growing influence she held over him. The Lumina Reach Foundation had already benefited from Whitmore Foundation funding, but for Sabrina, the allure wasn't just financial. It was power and seduction. She had done her homework. Caleb was married to a woman widely respected for her charitable work, but rumors suggested the relationship was not as solid as it appeared. Sabrina saw opportunity in every silent fracture. One evening, she invited Caleb to a small private cocktail gathering to celebrate the launch of their pilot program. The event was understated, held at a fashionable rooftop bar in Soma, attended by a carefully curated list of donors and partners. Caleb hesitated. He knew Liana had asked him to come home early for dinner that night, but the lure of finalizing key program strategies and the subtle undertone in Sabrina's invitation proved difficult to resist. At the rooftop, the city lights sparkled like scattered jewels below. Sabrina welcomed him with a warm smile and guided him to a secluded corner table. Though other guests mingled nearby, the atmosphere between them felt almost exclusive. As they clinked glasses in celebration of the pilot program's launch, Sabrina leaned in, her perfume enveloping the space between them. "I'm truly grateful for your support, Caleb," she murmured. "This initiative wouldn't have happened without you." He cleared his throat. It's a joint effort. You've done most of the heavy lifting. Her emerald eyes shimmered. Don't downplay the power of your name. Your endorsement opens doors I couldn't even approach on my own. We make a remarkable team. Their conversation flowed easily, laced with laughter, admiration, and an undercurrent of something deeper. At one point, after a passionate discussion about scaling the program internationally, Sabrina placed her hand lightly on his arm. We've been pushing so hard, it's good to just pause and savor the moment, don't you think? Caleb's pulse quickened. He found himself holding her gaze longer than he should have, aware of the charged current hanging in the air between them. For a fleeting second, Liana's face flashed through his mind. Her warm smile, the home-cooked meals she prepared, the selfless way she poured herself into helping others. But the thought evaporated in a haze of guilt and temptation. At the end of the evening, Sabrina walked him to the elevator. She gently squeezed his hand, her voice dropping to a whisper. I hope this is just the beginning of many successes, together. He nodded, his throat tight. Yes, I appreciate everything you've done. Sabrina leaned in, her breath warm against his ear. Until next time. Her lips hovered dangerously close, not quite a kiss, but not far either. Caleb didn't move. He didn't breathe. The elevator doors slid shut, leaving Caleb alone, surrounded by the soft hum of descending floors and a rush of emotions he couldn't quite name. Excitement, shame, confusion. He pressed his back against the cool elevator wall, eyes closed briefly. His wedding ring felt heavier than usual. Something dangerous was unfolding, and he knew it. But even as reason screamed at him to stop, to pull away, to return his focus to his marriage, he couldn't. The magnetic pull of Sabrina Morales was too strong. Back upstairs, Sabrina returned to the rooftop lounge, her eyes drifting over the sparkling San Francisco skyline. She was a step closer to her goal. If she could fully enmesh herself in Caleb Whitmore's world, she wouldn't just gain more funding, she'd elevate her social standing by aligning with one of California's most influential families. And with Caleb's last name came a seat at tables even money couldn't buy. The risk was real. If Liana Whitmore caught wind of this, the fallout could be catastrophic. But Sabrina had faced scandals before, and emerged unscathed every time. He's not the first powerful man I've charmed, she thought with cool confidence, but he might be the most useful. Her plan was simple: tighten her grip, but do so gradually, just enough to pull Caleb deeper in, never far enough to startle him. Like warming a pot 1 degree at a time, so subtle he wouldn't feel it until it boiled. And if Liana became a threat, Sabrina would do what she'd done before, play the misunderstood colleague, position herself as the woman who brought fresh energy and warmth, while subtly painting the wife as distant, uninterested, or out of sync with her husband's evolving world. But this time, there was a complication. Liana Whitmore wasn't some wide-eyed socialite. She was respected, sharp, a key player in philanthropic circles, and dangerously well-connected. She didn't just attend the galas, she helped shape them. Still, Sabrina wasn't concerned. Her ambition had survived far worse. She would proceed with the strategic finesse she had mastered. In the days that followed, she sent Caleb a series of carefully worded messages, playful, affectionate nods to their rooftop celebration. She never crossed the line into anything explicit. There was no need to leave a paper trail, but the tone was unmistakable. Little emojis, inside jokes from that night. A curated mix of flattery and familiarity. Caleb responded with a kind of cautious warmth, still resisting, still holding something back. That only sharpened Sabrina's resolve. What she didn't know, however, was that fate had already begun tipping the scales. Another powerful force had entered Liana Whitmore's life. Lucas Chen. And once a man of his caliber set his sights on a woman of substance, everything was bound to change. Even Sabrina Morales might soon find her grand plans eclipsed. Caleb stood in his expansive home office, staring at his own reflection in the glass. It was nearly midnight, and the estate's meticulously landscaped gardens shimmered under the silver light of the moon. He was alone. Liana had gone to bed hours ago. A half-finished glass of bourbon sat on his desk. His thoughts spiraled, looping through the tangled web of the past few months. He had crossed lines. Lines he once believed were sacred. It had started innocently, meetings, phone calls, collaborative efforts with Sabrina. But those turned into late-night texts, Those texts turned into rooftop cocktails, meaningful stares, and carefully veiled affection. He knew it was wrong. The guilt hit hardest in Liana's eyes, whenever she looked at him with concern and he couldn't meet her gaze. Yet somehow, each day drew him deeper into Sabrina's gravity. He sipped his bourbon, and his phone vibrated on the desk, a new message from her. He hesitated, self-loathing rising like bile in his throat. For a moment, he considered throwing the phone across the room, smashing it, silencing it all. But muscle memory and temptation were stronger. He picked it up. Busy day tomorrow. Just wanted to say goodnight and sweet dreams, Caleb. He tossed the phone away. His heart pounded. Is this really the life I want? Secret messages. Hidden encounters. The constant, gnawing dread of being found out. For all his success, his status, and wealth, he felt completely powerless over his own urges. His thoughts returned to Liana, to the vows he had once made, to the dreams they had shared, of building something lasting, meaningful, both in their family and in the world they hoped to impact. Where did that man go? The next afternoon, Caleb attended a high-profile charity symposium at the Regency on Nob Hill. As he moved through the gilded corridors, exchanging pleasantries with acquaintances, he caught sight of Liana across the ballroom. She wore a navy gown that complemented her composed elegance. She stood with a small group, politely engaged, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Something inside him twisted. He had been away from her world far too long. Summoning resolve, he waited until she finished speaking before approaching. "Liana," he said gently, "can we talk?" She turned, her expression cautious, guarded. Of course. They found a quiet alcove near a large potted palm. For a moment, he simply studied her face. He noticed the stress in the corners of her eyes, lines that hadn't been there before. "I've missed you," he said quietly. She didn't respond right away. Instead, she crossed her arms. "That's strange. You've been so busy, hardly home at all." Her words struck deep, but Caleb knew he had earned them. "I know I've been distant," he admitted. "Things have gotten complicated with the Foundation's new collaborations." Liana studied him, something steely behind her calm expression. "Caleb, I'm not naive. I see the way you've been lately, always glued to your phone, texting late at night, coming home at hours that don't make sense." She paused, voice tight. "If there's something I should know, just tell me." His pulse spiked. This was his moment. He could come clean, tell her he had strayed dangerously close to an emotional entanglement with Sabrina Morales. But fear gripped him. Instead, he offered half-truths. "It's just overseas negotiations, high-stakes stuff, a lot of moving parts. Nothing you need to worry about." Her eyes flickered. Hurt, disappointment, maybe even disbelief. "Fine." She turned to walk away. Desperation surged in him. "Wait, I'm sorry. Let's go somewhere this weekend. Just the two of us. We can talk, really talk." Liana paused. "I have a commitment Saturday, a hospital fundraising brunch." She hesitated, then added, "But Sunday. We can talk Sunday." He nodded quickly. "Yes, Sunday. We'll go to the lake house if that sounds good to you." She sighed and gently pulled her hand from his. "We'll see." Then she walked off, leaving him in the hallway with a crushing mix of regret and fleeting relief. What Caleb didn't know was that the next day would shift everything. Liana attended that philanthropic brunch, a grand affair filled with donors, executives, and high-profile guests. Among them was Lucas Chen. He had made no secret of his admiration, not just for Liana's dedication to social causes, but for the poise and strength she radiated in a world full of surface-level intentions. Something about her vulnerability stirred something inside him, and something about his steadiness pulled at something inside her. Later that evening, Caleb left a private lounge in Soma after a meeting with Sabrina. They'd been celebrating another funding milestone, clinking champagne glasses in triumph. Caught up in the moment and slightly tipsy from their success, Sabrina leaned in and hugged him tight. At that very second, a camera flash burst from the corner of the rooftop. A paparazzo, hidden in the shadows, had caught the embrace in perfect clarity. Caleb froze, his stomach dropping. Sabrina laughed softly, brushing it off. "Relax, darling. It's just a hug. No one's going to think anything of it." But as they parted ways, Caleb's mind raced. He knew better. He knew how fast rumors traveled and how fragile reputations could be. He realized he had been playing with fire. Now the flames threatened to consume him. Sure enough, the very next morning, gossip columns began to stir. Whitmore billionaire in warm embrace with striking philanthropist. The headline appeared with a blurry yet unmistakable photograph. Though the article was careful not to name names directly, anyone familiar with their world could easily recognize Caleb Whitmore and Sabrina Morales. The photo began circulating through high society group chats, discreet whispers, and exclusive private circles. By late afternoon, a colleague quietly pulled Caleb aside, showing him the article on their phone. Panic surged. He immediately called his PR team, voice low and urgent, demanding they get ahead of the story. They assured him they would spin the image as a misinterpreted moment, an innocent gesture between professional partners. But Caleb knew it was too late. The whispers had begun. And if they hadn't already reached Liana, it was only a matter of hours. Regret sank into something deeper. Dread. He never intended for it to go this far. But now, the fragile framework of his marriage, already weakened by emotional distance, was close to caving in entirely. As he rushed to his car, phone buzzing relentlessly with calls and alerts, a cold truth settled in his chest. He stood to lose the one person who had been there since the beginning, Liana. Meanwhile, the scandalous photo zipped through elite networks like wildfire. It reached Liana via an unassuming text from a friend. "Have you seen this? Call me if you need anything." At first, she didn't want to look. She already feared the worst. She had felt the shift, the cold, creeping detachment, but seeing proof was something else entirely. Still, she forced herself to click the link. There, across the screen of her phone, was Caleb, in a close, unmistakably warm embrace with Sabrina Morales. Their expressions glowed, intimate, effortless, familiar. Liana's stomach twisted. Even though she had long suspected something was wrong, the visual proof hit her like a blow to the ribs. Her heart pounded, her hands trembled, and a wave of tears threatened to rise. Part of her wanted to scream, to throw the phone across the room, to collapse beneath the weight of betrayal. But then another voice, clearer, stronger, whispered in her mind, "Don't let them see you break." That afternoon, Liana attended a major charity function at the Marriott Marquis. The event was intended to raise funds for advanced pediatric medical equipment, an initiative she deeply cared about. She arrived composed, dressed in deep emerald silk, her expressions serene. She greeted donors with grace, her smile practiced, her presence poised, but inside, she was unraveling. As she made her rounds, her eyes scanned the crowd, and there, near the far side of the ballroom, stood Lucas Chen. He appeared momentarily startled to see her. As though without a word spoken, he sensed the storm flickering behind her eyes. He politely excused himself from his companions and made his way toward her. He approached her quietly. "Liana?" She managed a faint smile. "Hello, Lucas." He gently guided her toward a quieter corner of the ballroom. "I heard some things," he said softly, watching her face. "Are you all right? You seem shaken." She swallowed, forcing a tight nod. "I'm fine. Just trying to focus on the event." But her eyes told the truth. They betrayed a pain she could no longer hide. Without another word, Lucas handed her a glass of water. "You need to stay hydrated. These events can be exhausting, even without everything else going on." She accepted it, moved by the simple gesture. "Thank you," she murmured, meeting his gaze. In that quiet moment, the compassion in his eyes almost broke through the wall she had so carefully held up. The rest of the function blurred around her. She delivered a short speech on advancing pediatric care, her voice calm, her words practiced, but the applause felt hollow in her ears. All she could see was the image, Caleb's arms wrapped around Sabrina. By the time the event came to a close, Liana felt hollowed out, on the verge of tears. As guests trickled toward the exit, Lucas remained nearby. "Liana, come with me," he said gently. "I have a car waiting. Let's go somewhere quiet, just to talk." Under normal circumstances, she would have politely declined. She wasn't one to give gossip columnists new fodder. But tonight, she didn't care about rumors. She simply didn't have the strength to pretend anymore. She let him lead her outside, into a sleek black sedan that whisked them through the glowing city streets. Eventually, they arrived at a secluded rooftop lounge Lucas frequented. Dim lighting, low music, and wide windows that offered panoramic views of San Francisco's skyline. They settled onto a plush sofa near a glass railing. The city sparkled below them, a quiet sea of light stretching endlessly into the night. A server brought over 2 steaming cups of tea. Lucas gave a quiet thanks before turning back to her. "Talk to me," he said softly. Liana stared into the tea, steam curling around her fingers. "I don't know where to start," she whispered. "I've spent months trying to hold my marriage together. I thought if I gave Caleb space, he'd find his way back to me." A tear slipped down her cheek. She brushed it away. "I was wrong. I was so naive." Lucas didn't flinch. His eyes were steady, grounded in empathy. "You deserve honesty. You deserve respect and love." His voice was firm but kind. "If he's not giving you that, you have every right to demand it or to walk away." She sniffled, nodding slowly, trying to hold herself together. "I never thought I'd be in this position," she whispered, voice trembling. "But after seeing that photo, I can't pretend anymore." Lucas exhaled, his expression softening with compassion. "Liana, you're an extraordinary woman. Any man would be lucky, honored to have you by his side. Don't ever forget that." She looked at him, her heart fluttering in a strange, unexpected way. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You've been very kind, but I don't know what to do next." Something flickered in Lucas's eyes, an unshakable resolve. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Liana's breath caught instantly. Her fingers tightened around the stem of her glass. Her body froze, but her heart raced. He slowly opened it. Inside, a stunning diamond ring sparkled beneath the glow of the rooftop lights, reflecting the city skyline in prismatic shards. "Liana," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "we haven't known each other long, but what I feel with you, it's unlike anything I've ever known. I see your strength, your grace, your loyalty, and your heart, and I can't sit by while someone else breaks you." He paused, gathering his words. "Please, hear me out. I want to be the man who gives you the love, respect, and peace you deserve." He looked up at her, eyes unwavering. "Will you marry me?" Stunned, Liana's mind raced. Shock, disbelief, a pulse of excitement she didn't expect. She had just come face to face with her husband's betrayal, and now here she was, under the moonlight, with a powerful CEO offering her something entirely new. It felt surreal, like slipping into a dream or a storm. She inhaled, trying to steady her emotions. "Lucas, this is so unexpected. I mean, my marriage." He gently placed his hand over hers. "I know you're still married," he said softly, "but I needed to speak my truth. I couldn't let you walk away without knowing how I feel. I'm willing to wait if that's what you need. But please know, my intentions are real, and I won't run." His thumb grazed the back of her hand, not possessive, just steady, like someone ready to anchor her, if she chose. Tears welled in her eyes, spilling down her cheeks. She turned her gaze out over the city lights, the expanse of San Francisco glittering beneath them. Images of Caleb's betrayal flashed behind her eyes, his secrecy, the embrace, the lies. And then, the contrast. Lucas, steady and sincere, never once crossing a boundary, always offering support without demand. And in that moment, the weight of her silence over the past months hit her harder than any argument ever could. She felt a wave of longing, for freedom, for clarity, for something new. But the weight of the moment was undeniable. She wiped a tear from her cheek and looked down at the ring, then back at Lucas. "Lucas, I can't answer that right now. My life is chaos. I need time to breathe, to understand where I'm even standing." He nodded gently, closing the box without a word of protest. "Take all the time you need," he said quietly. "I'll be here, waiting for you." In that quiet rooftop lounge, with the city stretching infinitely beneath their feet, Liana realized she was standing at a crossroads. One path led back to Caleb, to a marriage cracked by betrayal and doubt. The other offered something new, possibly real, possibly healing. But it came at a dizzying pace that left her unsure of her own heart, torn between devastation and the fragile promise of renewal, hope of new love. She could only cling to one promise, that whatever choice she made, she would do it with her head held high. Heart-pounding, Caleb stood alone on the balcony of his Sonoma estate, the cool wind brushing against his face. His eyes were fixed on his phone screen, where the image stared back at him. The photograph. The one that had just been sent by a colleague. It showed Lucas Chen down on one knee, holding out a glittering ring, and across from him stood Liana, stunned, unsure, clearly torn by the enormity of what was unfolding. In that single frame, Caleb saw everything: the cost of his actions, the slow unraveling of a love he had once vowed to protect, the hollow promises, the nights he'd chosen distraction over devotion. And now, Another man, one even more powerful than himself, was offering Liana what he had failed to give: loyalty, admiration, sincerity. Would Liana say yes? Would she step into a future of stability and newfound affection, leaving behind the fractured marriage she had tried so hard to salvage? Or would Caleb fight for redemption before it was too late? The answer would come down to one question: can love survive betrayal? And does a single moment of regret ever outweigh 1,000 acts of neglect? But Liana had already made her choice. The next morning, she stood in the sunlit hallway of the Sonoma estate, not as a wife desperate to fix something broken, but as a woman ready to let go. Caleb opened the door, surprised. He hadn't expected her. Not like this. She handed him a sealed envelope. "This doesn't need to be dramatic," she said softly. "It just needs to be honest." He opened the letter as she turned to leave. "Caleb, I waited. I hoped. I stayed silent when I should have screamed. But I will not stay where I'm no longer seen. You didn't cheat with your body. You cheated with your attention, your time, your care. Every moment you gave to someone else, you took from us. And now, there's nothing left to save. You taught me that love can die when it's taken for granted. But Lucas reminded me it can be reborn with truth." By the time he looked up, she was already gone. He stood in the echo of her absence, the weight of the letter heavier than anything he'd ever built in his empire. Across the city, in the soft light of a private rooftop garden, Liana met Lucas again. There was no grand proposal this time, no pressure, just presence. She reached for his hand. "I'm not ready to say yes," she said, "but I'm ready to stop saying no to myself." Lucas smiled. "That's all I needed to hear." They didn't kiss, they didn't rush, they just stood there, hand in hand with the skyline stretching endlessly before them. It wasn't a fairy tale ending, but it was real. Because in the end, some mistakes cost more than apologies can repay. And sometimes the greatest love story is the one you write after walking away from the wrong one. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey of passion, heartbreak, and second chances in Millionaire Husband Regrets Hugging Mistress when he sees his wife being proposed to by a CEO. If you were moved by Liana's quiet strength, Caleb's long overdue reckoning, or Lucas's unwavering sincerity, we want to hear from you. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe love can survive betrayal? Or is walking away the most powerful choice of all? If you felt something tonight, please like, share, and subscribe for more stories that hit where it hurts and heal where it matters. Until next time, thank you for watching.